Welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast, the nature-based show hosted by me, Jack Perks. Each week I'm joined by a guest from the world of wildlife television, art and science. We take a light-hearted look into what makes these people tick and connect with the natural world so strongly, with new episodes out every Tuesday. In 2009, I started university at Falmouth, which seems like a fucking lifetime ago, since I was semi-conscious in club iron, stuffing pasties down my face. But I enrolled on the Marine and Natural History Photography degree, largely because the name sounded pretty cool in the marine side and whatever. And we've already explored in this podcast if the degree is necessary for wildlife photography. That was in episode 23 if you want to head back to that. But today I'm chatting with MNHP tutor Adrian Brown, as he is the senior lecturer on the course, and he heads up the third years and also runs the professional practice modules, which is what Adrian did when I was there, for the students in their second year. In this episode, we talk about the course, what it takes to get on it, and what percentage of students make it into wildlife photography. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter, @TitBearded, and there's also a Facebook page, The Bearded Tits Podcast. Here's our chat. So welcome to the podcast, Adrian.
Thank you. It's great to see you, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to see you as we were before our internet crashed out and we had to turn our cameras on.
Yeah.
But no, it's thank you for the invitation. It was lovely to get, and I, as you know, I always love sort of having any excuse to connect with a lot of you that I've got to know quite well over the years. So thank you for the invitation.
Well, we've had a few MNHPers on the podcast in the past, like Joe Gray, Austin Ferguson, Sam Stewart, and the industries, they're getting like rats, these MNHP students. They're bloody everywhere.
But is that a bad thing? I suppose it is. It's not a bad thing from my point of view, but it's presumably just yet more competition for you.
Well, it's how do you say this without sounding like an arsehole? But I guess I'm further up the food chain at the moment. But as you used to say in your lectures, it's never a permanent thing. There could be someone who's just rising through the ranks now, and in a few years, they could be top camera on the blue chips, and I'm still pissing about with whatever I do. So yeah, it's never permanent. So I guess I should be nicer to students, really, because my default is piss off, don't bother me. But what I should really do is, I'm sorry, I'm busy right now, maybe talk to me later.
Yeah. I have to say, I mean, in the same position I was when I left Manchester, when I finished my degree and went to London. A lot of us were getting work off each other. We couldn't do it, and we were all from Manchester, and it was sort of, on one hand, you're right, it's competition, but then actually, it's sort of, we used to try and keep it on the island, which was our phrase, keep it within ourselves. Ex-Manchester crew in London fighting to survive. So we all sort of slightly protected each other's backs a little bit. And there were a lot of us in London, probably like there are a lot of you MNHPers now out in the sort of natural history world. So.
No, I agree. I think that's right. I mean, there is obviously the element of competition, but at the end of the day, you've always got something in common. And I'd rather work with someone who I've got something to talk about. If you meet, and regularly, if I'm working on, say, a one-show shoot or something like that, there's always an MNHP person on that, and you end up talking about Club Eye and Oggy Oggy's pasties or whatever. And it's just a nice link to have with them.
Yeah.
I tend to find my back gets up more when someone comes at me and they're just like, how do you do this? Tell me where this location is. And they've not even got me flowers and chocolates to smooth me over. They've just straight in there, just pumping me for information. And then that's normally I just ignore them or I think it's all about how people ask and what they want and what they're expecting from you.
Yeah, and I'd always advise you guys, if you do get an approach like that, ignore it, because that's not what any of us are teaching. So
no.
If they haven't listened, I mean, this is this is for anybody, but yeah, they've got to approach it properly. And the other thing I think is so important is if somebody has approached you, a student, a current student or an ex-student that's approached you nicely, and you've answered them, then what they've got to do is reply with some kind of thanks. Don't just sort of take it as though you have a right to it. So
I had one, I can't remember, Josh, I think his name was. He asked for some dipper footage the other day. He's struggling because they can't go out and shoot as easy as they can.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I don't mind that. Another big factor is if I'm busy or not. If I'm not very busy, I'm probably more likely to help and reply. If I'm busy, then I might not be able to. But if I can help people and it's not too much of an effort, then I'm happy to do it.
Well, I mean, I know for an absolute fact that all of you will help wherever you can. But because I come from not the natural history world, but come from the same photographic world, that it, all the rules still apply. They applied to me when I was coming up through the ranks, if you like, as you did. So, and for me now, it's quite nice that I have this great opportunity to sort of give back. And it was an industry that I was in for 25 years before I started teaching, and I just spent 25 years taking. Now I have this opportunity to sort of put back a little bit of what I've already taken. So I know you're doing a bit of teaching as well. So
yeah,
you're doing the same thing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting being on the other side of the fence, because you realise, I don't know if it's the same on all universities, but like what goes on behind and whatever, which is quite good fun. But for those that don't know, then, so you obviously are a lecturer on the Marine and Natural History Photography course, which we'll probably abbreviate to M&HP for sake of ease. I always remember talking to people when I was pissed up and say, what course are you on? What? Like, you try and say that when you've had quite a bit. But yeah, so probably abbreviate that. But yeah, so what is the M&HP course for people that don't know?
Well, the M&HP course is, first and foremost, it is a photographic degree. It's an arts degree, not a science degree. And that's the most important thing. It's a photographic degree that has its sort of feet deeply embedded in environmental issues with global warming, oceanic pollution, deforestation, all those sort of climate change issues. But it's all about the natural world and natural history. It also has the dive element to it, because it is marine and natural history photography. So there is a strong dive component, which you were involved in a lot of,
yeah.
About, at the moment, we run about, I guess, somewhere between 30 and 40% of the students are involved in the dive side. And that's a really big draw. Lots of people come to the course because they want to do that bit. And I fully understand. Yeah. I fully understand that. But it is, at its heart, it's a photographic arts degree at Falmouth Uni, which is, formerly was, when you were there, what was it? It was University College, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's right.
It was a university college, and prior to that, it was Falmouth College of Art, which has got an extraordinary reputation way back when. So, and it is still effectively, it's an art college, really, although it has proper university status, and it awards its own degrees. When you put your gown on, if that should ever be the case, I can't remember what the colours are. They yellow and black, or yellow and white?
Possibly,
like
yeah. Possibly something like
that. It's not something, well, I wear it much more often, once a year, obviously, my Manchester colours, but it's probably something you don't wear. It's not something you dress up on a Friday evening. Just
not normally. Not unless it's one of those special nights, yeah. Because I didn't realise as well that we started the same. So 2009, I was a first year on that course, and that's the same year. I think you were working at the uni prior, but that's the first time you were working on the course. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd been in London for 20 years, and Emily and I, my wife and I had two small young kids. We moved out of London after 20 years and moved to the southwest. And sort of by accident, I was asked to do a visiting lecturer slot, and then they asked me to take on a little module, which was professional practice. But it was originally for the what we call the BA photography, which was the more conceptual art-based photography course. And Marine and Natural History had only been running, I think, about 2 years, and they approached me and said, would you come and do a little bit of that professional practice for us? So I think I'd done a year before, just literally I was there for 2 hours a week, one morning a week, no more than that, as what they call an AL, which is an associate lecturer. And very often, there are industry people that we have a skill set that they need, and it just ticks one of those boxes. And so I kind of started doing it thinking, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. But you guys were nice enough to obviously say nice enough things for me to be invited back, really. Here I still am.
Yeah, because you're more or less last man standing, I think. Oh, no, there's still a few of you from when I was there, actually. I know H and Joe and a few others are still knocking about, but it's changed a little bit.
Yeah, and it's grown, of course, because how many were in your year? 30, maybe?
For 47, I think.
Oh, was as much as that?
I think so. But I remember the year above us had like 20-something, and then a year above that, which is because when I started, it was the first time the course had 3 full years, because it was still a fresh new degree at that point.
Yeah.
I think the third years there was only like 11 or something like that. So there weren't that many, which 47 I thought was a lot. But then what have you got now?
I've got 91 in the third year because I now run the third year full time. That's an awful lot of plates for me to keep spinning.
You definitely don't know all the names.
Well, I don't test me, but I will say I do, and I promise the third years, because I now, because of my industry connections and that sort of stuff, and the professional practice, which has always been at the core of what I do, I run the third year. I think they sort of think that I might be a bit too scary for the first years, or not as forgiving as I ought to be, maybe. I'm not interested if you haven't worked out the difference between F22 and F2.8. So get to the third years, you guys know all that stuff. So it's a lot, but I do pledge to the third years that by the time we get to the new year, so I've had a term when I'm learning them all, and I get to the new year and I do know them all. This year's obviously been very, very different.
Yeah.
And I'm missing an awful lot of what I love about it, as they are. But no, I think, please don't test me because I'll crash and burn, but I will say, I do know them all, but it is 91 plates that I'm trying to keep.
Point and smile. Point and smile is normally the way to go. I'm bloody awful with. I either remember the name but not the face, or remember the face and not the name, and I just kind of fumble my way through it.
Yeah, you can always resort to, hey, good to see you, mate.
Yeah, definitely. Buddy, hey buddy, hey you.
Buddy's a good one. Yeah, Buddy's a good one.
A few of those.
Not so good with the girls, but
I need to use a more neutral term probably.
Yeah, probably.
So how's the course evolved over the years then? Because I imagine it's quite different from when I was there, because I think it was still kind of in its infancy, is the polite way to put it, when I was there. So that is the polite way to put it. But when you look back, it was the guy who originally wrote the course, Dave Matthews, when he put the thing together, and he was an old school teacher, photographic teacher, got masses of experience, but it was a hugely ambitious course when you look at what it was trying to do. And I think we have no direct competition globally. I don't think there's anybody doing what we do, and it's still to this day it's extraordinarily ambitious to try and achieve what we do across the natural world, the terrestrial, the underwater. So it's hugely ambitious. So it still, it doesn't have its problems. We've moved on. We've obviously got much bigger numbers because I think, as I said, there's 91 in the third year. I think there's 101 in the second year, 102 in the third. So it's 300 odd students on one course. The staff have increased. We've broadened the base enormously, and we've got some great operators now. Neil Aldridge, an award-winning conservation photographer, and I had this great opportunity to bring Neil on board. I knew him a little bit, and he actually approached me and said, "Listen, if there's anything I can do, let me know." And I was able to bring him on board, which was fantastic for me. Another photographer, but a photographer with real quantifiable skills with natural history, with his conservation work. Anna Roberts, who's ex NHU, WWF, she produced Tim Flack's book Endangered, and she's now running the kind of film part. And there are lots of other people that we're bringing in all the time, and we're always looking to bring in new operators. But it's in some ways it's quite difficult because we're a long way away from the center of excellence. So it's to find really bona fide operators, industry operators that can teach and are prepared to come and spend quite a lot of time right down here on the toe of England, really. Yeah, that's the thing. I always going from Nottingham to Falmouth, it was like a 7-hour train journey when I was at uni. It was a right ball ache, but it was it was an amazing place to live, and absolutely great to do that course. So when people are applying, what is it that you're looking for? Like, so I'm trying to remember when I came down for my interview. I can't remember if you and I remember Jim vividly, because Jim's got a face that you forget. So Jim was in there, and maybe Tony and someone else. Yeah, and I went for my interview, and I think I did a little. I can't remember if you guys asked for a project, if you said come with a project or just come with whatever you had. And then Jim more or less got up at the end and said, "Oh, you're in." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't think you meant to tell me that. Aren't you meant to wait?" And he went, "No, you're in." You're in. And I was like, "Oh, right, okay, that's good. That's nice to know." But like, what is it you're looking for?
I wasn't. I don't think I interviewed you because I don't think I was asked to interview for a few years. But Jim was a bit like that. Jim used to make a snap decision, go, "Yeah, you're in."
Yeah.
But what are we looking for? We're looking for a drive and a determination, really. And I don't wish your podcast to end up being, a publicity pitch for the university. I think that would be wrong. But no, we're looking for a drive and a determination, an interest, a passion. And that's why, these online interviews at the moment, which is obviously because of the pandemic, we're having to operate. I'm happy to do them online, but I'd much rather, not see the whites of the eyes. That sounds a bit scary, but I'd rather sort of chat to them, and you get a real sense of somebody early on. And it's not for everybody, to be fair. And sometimes, you may have a student that secretly, I know, all they need to do is spend a couple of years out doing something else and then come back to it. Because I didn't do my degree until I was 26, my photography degree until I was 26. And if I'd gone to uni at 18, I'd have been excuse the F word, but I'd have been a fucking car crash. And, I'd have been one of those students that lecturers thought, oh, what a wanker, get rid of him. Yeah. Because, some of us just take a little time to mature, work out what we want to do. Coming back to your question, I think it's a passion, really, for the natural world and all those component parts. And then from that, that you can sometimes see a certain determination, which, I saw in your year group in spades, you and Sam and Jackie and who else? Josh. I'm trying to think who else was there. There was quite a strong core of your year that had got a real passion, real determination. And that's something, because I came from industry, I knew that would serve you well. That core determination, desire to succeed.
I guess as well, like we're mentioning, like the name's quite funky, marine natural history photography. You might get people who literally say, oh, that sounds fun, and they've got no prior interest. And I guess it's weeding out the ones that are serious and the ones that are maybe just not giving it as much thought as they perhaps should have.
Yeah, and also the other thing is that they get saddled with this bill now. I was of that generation. Yeah. I was with that generation that was fortunate enough to have, free higher education.
Lucky bastard, aren't you?
Well, yeah, it is something that it would be wrong to say it weighs heavily on me, but I have to say I am super conscious of it. And without getting political, was this a good thing? Who knows? There are obviously huge benefits with the fee structure and the fact that, now the facilities at Falmouth are second to none.
Oh, you've got millions of pounds of equipment, haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when I was first taken around the studios by some of the BA students I knew, because they used to come and visit me in my studio in London, and I got to know a few of the Falmouth students, and they really rocked my boat. They were really edgy. They were on it. They knew what they were talking about. And when I first moved down to the Southwest, a couple of them I know who are now working in London and, successful advertising guys, they took me around the facilities. And in my head, I thought, it'll be a bit like when I was at Manchester in the 80s, big room with a broken camera in the corner and a one knackered light. I'm leaning against the wall because it's only got two legs on its stand. That's what I thought I was going to look at. And I was taken around. At the time, I think there were about 6 studios that are the measure of any high facility in London that I'd spent a lot of time in. They just could match that in the facilities and the equipment and the way they work. So, I was just blown away. And that, I think, is something that does come from the fees, that, you've got much more. We can have more staff on board. We can have much better equipment. I think if there weren't the fees, we might be going back. So it's a tricky one to. So
what are they on? They're on nine grand a year now, aren't they? Something like that.
I was going to say, don't quote me on this, but this is going public. So I think it's 9,250. I think.
Okay.
9,250.
When I was there, it was 3,000 and something.
Yeah.
For a year, but we also got bursaries and maintenance grants, which I don't think they get now. I'm not 100%. They might do.
I have to be a bit careful because I'm not entirely sure, what.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine. But yeah, there were certainly some opportunities there, which I try and say this without sounding dodgy as fuck, but there are ways around it, and so
I think would I go public on this? Yeah, I used to stand in front of you guys and say, listen, get a decent accountant.
Yeah. No, that's not.
Yeah, get a good accountant. Now,
yeah, definitely.
You can read that any way you like, but I've always had a really good accountant. So that's where it goes, I think.
Yeah, but from what I remember, and again, I think each year is different. I think it's something like you have to be earning 15 grand profit before you start paying your university loan back. I
I
think.
think. Well, I think it's
But
now
it might be
got,
different. But it might be
yeah, I think
different
it's
for the
changed.
current year. Might be different
Yeah, I
for
think
these
it's
guys.
changed. It was 21,000 gross
Okay.
gross salary, but I think that's now gone up. So
Okay.
I'd have to go and do a bit of Google search. I think it
I
may have
don't
gone
know.
to 25,000.
I mean,
Yeah, salary. But anyway,
just move house a couple of times. Student finance won't find you. You'll be
yes,
fine. Just if they send you letters, just put it in the bin. That'll be all right.
yeah.
You'll be fine.
What you can't do is go and live abroad for 5 years. I think they've closed.
Oh,
that
have they
loophole.
stopped that?
Yeah,
Oh,
they've
that
locked,
was
they've,
that was it, because you could go
yeah,
abroad and then you'd get wiped,
yeah.
which would have been the sensible thing to do. So do you get an early
Right.
sense of who's going to make it? Let's say you've got these third years and you're looking and you think, you know what, I think that person is potentially going to do quite well. And maybe it works the other way, where you think someone, well, they were a fucking waste of space, and they've actually gone on to do quite well.
Yeah, there's always that. I think I mean, I can only speak personally, but I'll get a sense of ones that could really do extraordinarily well, only because they're going into an environment that I was totally embedded in and understand, the determination and the long hours and to the exclusion of all else, 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, if you want to achieve. And that comes through in spades. And the really good ones just have it. You've got an awful lot that everybody's got the potential to do that. So you kind of know who's going to be. Hang on, just get that. You kind of know. It's all right. It'll be somebody selling me something dumb.
Wasn't it in our lectures, Adrian? If the phone went off, you had to buy everyone a beer.
Oh fuck! Yes.
So, if you could just post that, if you could just post us a beer, that'd be great.
You need to keep that in now, don't you?
Yeah, I will.
You're absolutely right. I've been totally caught out.
I will keep that in, and your students, whoever listens to this, will probably get over you now.
Oh my god! So the beer bill is going to be huge. Yeah, and that'll be somebody selling me some dumbass double glazing because I'm at home at the moment in the office at home. But anyway, yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'll look forward to the beer tab on this one.
Yeah, you will.
Good spot, that one. I can't remember what we were talking about now.
So it was if you get a sense of people kind of making it, like, if you kind of
I think there will always be those that, are quiet, studious grafters that kind of don't like to push themselves to the front. And they always, they're always those. But everybody's got potential to do it. But yeah, the kind of guys right up front, and there are years, every single year has got some fantastic operators that go on and do very well and will go on and do very well. A lot of the others are there for other reasds, really. I mean, they're enjoying the experience. And I always used to say to you, if I was 30 years younger or something, probably a bit more, I'd have fought every one of you for a place on this course.
Yeah,
because it is. I do think it's fundamentally a really great course. And as we touched on earlier, it in its early days it had some teething problems. Still hugely ambitious, as we mentioned, and so we've still got to work bloody hard to make it work. And this year particularly has put us under a lot of pressure. But that's another issue. What are students getting in the pandemic? That's another debate, isn't it?
It's
really?
a tricky one, isn't it?
It's a really tricky one.
I guess the $1 million question is, what percentage would you say go on to become wildlife or full-time wildlife photographers and camera ops? And now I guess there's no hard answer because each year is going to be different and whatever. Yeah. But have you noticed a pattern, for example, or does it vary?
No, I think pattern has never changed. Even when I was at Manchester, I think you tend to have about 10%.
Okay.
10% go on. And as you mentioned, wildlife photographers or camera operators. But then I always felt the course was much broader than that. If you wanted to come to Falmouth and be a wildlife photographer, you can. There's plenty of scope for that, but you don't have to. And I've always encouraged them, to look more broadly at where they're going. And we've got an awful lot of ex-students who've gone into conservation on all sorts of levels: marketing, social media, hands-on stuff with various outfits that we'd all be familiar with. So I think it's broader than that. And you can use your degree, those transferable skills, if you like, to enable you to go and do almost anything. Your original question was sort of how many go on and produce content for, the big four or wildlife photographers and cameramen. It's probably, I guess, about 10%.
Yeah,
I guess, but that doesn't mean to say that there are an awful lot that are doing really awesome work in other fields.
No, and I was going to ask you that actually, so I'm glad you've brought that up. That I was going to say, what professions do other people go on to do? Because just because you're not doing that, it doesn't mean that you're failing in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, I do keep in touch with a lot of people I went to uni with, and some of them are doing some amazing stuff. You know, not necessarily that. Or was it one of them's working for an elephant charity, and things like so. Some awesome stuff, and they'll certainly be living a much more comfortable life than I am. You know, Weetabix if I'm lucky in the morning. You know, so it's interesting to see what other people go on to do. I mean, Mark Fox, who was on my year, I think he's living in the Amazon now doing conservation photography out there. It's absolutely bonkers some of the stuff people get up to.
And Mark has just done because I asked Mark to do one of those films that you've kindly done for me to show the 3 years of MNHP students now. And Mark's just done a little piece to camera for me that we're gonna show during this week just for students. He's out there. Where's he? Ecuador at the moment.
That's it. Yeah.
But loads of people have gone on to do really fascinating stuff, and it's not all about just sitting behind a big long lens, because as you and I both know, that if you want to make any money, be a plumber. Don't go into yours and my world, but we went into it because we had a passion and a love for it.
Definitely, yeah. It's not a monetary thing. I mean, you've got to earn a living, but you don't. I can only speak from personal experience, but I don't make a great deal of money. You know, I make enough to pay the bills and keep the lights on, but that's about it. There's not a lot to play with. I mean, you only need to see how I dress and how gaunt I look. It's not it's not a and the hours are unsociable, and there's all kinds of stuff like that. But I could honestly not imagine doing anything else. And I love whether it's early mornings or I'm sat in some river freezing my arse off. I wouldn't want to be doing anything else, so I can't complain.
So that's and I think that's what it comes down to, really.
Definitely. And are there any students, and you don't have to say me, Adrian, so don't feel hoodwinked into it. Are there any students that have stood out to you over the years?
Lots, every single year. And that's kind of why, as you know, I fell into this slightly accidentally, really, the teaching. But I totally understand why teachers become teachers, because there are so many of you that go on and do well. You're right, there was a great core in your year, my kind of first MNHP year, really, although I did teach a little bit on the year before, but the sort of first bona fide. So obviously you and I have always got that connection, because it was the first time I sort of ironed out the glitches of my teaching, if you like. There was a lot from your year, but there have been every single year. There's loads of them really that really shine. However, what's interesting, and we have this debate, you, myself, and Sam Stewart, about, it's going to take you a minimum of 10 years. We always,
I was trying not to bring that up. I thought, I just thought, every time I see you, we end up talking about this, and I thought, you know what, Jack, I'm not going to mention it today, and you had to I'm
mentioning it, and I'll tell you why I'm mentioning it. There's a very good reason I'm mentioning
it. Go on, then.
Because it's 10 years ago since you left, and you guys are just about starting to make it. Whatever make it is, it's a bit of a silly phrase, really. So there are students that have left 4 years ago that I would, I'd put money on the fact that, they're really going to be rocking it. We'll know their name in 6 years' time, but it's going to be that 6 years before you and I actually know. They've got to graft it out. It's a sort of rite of passage in a way. So apologies to Sam if he's listening. I brought the bloody thing up again. They're 10 years. Will he not shut up about his 10 years?
That came from Doug Allen, I think, wasn't he? Because he said, so to just give some background on that story, Doug Allen is a big camera up. He said that if you've not made it within 5 years, you should maybe consider a different career. Whereas obviously you kind of subscribe to 10. I think me and Sam lean more towards 5. But I guess at the end of the day, everyone's going to be different. Everyone's got different circumstances. And if you're really keen on making this your career, then it won't matter how long it takes you. But
and that's
as a guideline.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And we all love Doug Allen. He's top of his game. Has been for he's forgotten more than I'll ever know about. Lots of stuff. But I remember when he said that 5 years. I kind of I got the sense when he said that to you all that he was looking at you as future competition, and that was the quickest way of getting you.
I think the cynical man would say he just did it to kind of shut a few of us down, and so he's got a bit more work. Which, as a professional camera up now, I can think it's not a bad idea. I should really shoot some of these fuckers down and save myself some competition. But
by which stage, my role was to give you, a positive spin on it. It's not 5, it's a bit longer, so don't beat yourselves up over it. But listen, you're quite right, and that's the most important thing. The time frame is an irrelevance, and what the fuck is making it anyway? For Christ's sake, if you're happy doing what you do, then you've made it. You've really made it. If you're happy doing it.
I did a kind of rant. Every now and again, I do a little ranty podcast, and there was one about freebies actually, and in that I was just saying that at the end of the day, as long as what you're doing makes you happy and you're living from it, then who gives a fuck if you're not winning competitions or if you're not on telly or whatever? It doesn't matter. Absolutely. As long as you're happy doing what you're doing, that's the main thing in life. So that's how I kind of
right.
That's how I.
You're absolutely right.
So you're not a wildlife photographer by trade, but obviously you are a photographer. No. Do you think that gives you an advantage teaching on a wildlife photography course? Because people might find it strange that there's a lecturer that's not a wildlife photographer. But do you think that brings advantages to it?
I think it brings some advantages and disadvantages. To give a little backstory to this, and forgive me for those who may have already heard this story, was when the head of M&HP approached me and asked me to come and work, on your course. The first thing I said to him was, and I quote, "Fuck, I don't know the difference between a fish and a bird." And he said to me, "That's not your job. That's the student's job. Your job is to get them up to speed professionally. My passion's cars and motorbikes. I spend so much of my time photographing motorbikes. Me photographing pictures of motorbikes and you photographing freshwater fish. We're photographing what we're passionate about, but we've got to try and generate an income from that. So." My role was very much about, it doesn't really matter what you're photographing, but this is how we can maybe monetize it. This is how you can probably make, something of it. It is true that in the earlier days, I think 1 or 2 students were probably slightly critical of me because, I really didn't know the difference between a fish and a bird, and kind of expected me to know. But I've always kind of tried to stick to the fact that, no, it's up to the student. This is your job. This is your specialist field. I'm now going to show you, how you can maximize that and all the other bits that you're going to require to go out into an environment that you and I both understand and know well. So I think it's double-edged. It's both an advantage and a disadvantage. I think I can be, in some ways, it enables me to, head up that third year with a really broad base of skills. And believe it or not, by a process of osmosis, I now have worked out the difference between a fish and a bird. And actually, I don't have in-depth knowledge at all, but I can at least guide, and sometimes I can identify a bird and I haven't got it wrong, thank God.
There you go, that's winning then.
So I think it's in a funny sort of way, it's sort of slightly difficult one to answer. I think it's both advantage and disadvantage. But hey, I'm passionate about photography, always have been, and I've been fortunate enough to spend, what have I spent now, 35 years in an industry that I adore as much today as I did when I started back in 1980 something. So I think I'd like to think that students appreciate that, the fact that this guy's passionate about what he does and therefore what they do. So
I think that's I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't you weren't hired to tell a chaffinch from a albatross or whatever. It was to kind of get people out there.
I could however do that now.
There you go. That's the you're the next Bill Oddie, Adrian, aren't you, if you can
I'm not. No, I'm not.
But no, I get the point, and that's it, definitely, to bring that skill set to a course that definitely needed it. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and it's great to catch up and kind of think about that course again. It was a great time being on it. So
good,
thanks for kind of coming on, buddy.
Pleasure. And thank you for inviting me. I love it, as you know, I love catching up with all of you as much as I can. And the sooner the pandemic's over, we can get some beers together. But thank you for the invite, and take care. And I'll look forward to listening to more of your podcasts. You're doing a great job.
Cheers, buddy. Bye.
All righty. Cheers.
That was Adrian Brown. So maybe you're thinking about going on a degree course, or maybe you're currently on the M&HP course. And it's just going to give you some food for thought, that hopefully. I try and be positive, but I pride myself on being truthful when people ask for this kind of stuff. On the previous podcast we did about degrees, I always think that, do you need a wildlife photography degree? No, you don't need one. But I think every single person will maybe benefit or not benefit from different things. And in particular, I think that if I had not done that course, I wouldn't be where I am today. Not because of what I learnt on the course, but because it kept me focused for 3 years. Had I just, been fucking around for 3 years, then I probably wouldn't be doing wildlife photography. I'd be doing something wildlife related, I'm sure, but not necessarily the photography. But the degree kept me focused, and that's what I'm grateful for. And I think some people will greatly benefit from that. Other people will think, you know what, this is not for me, and they'll still make it. So it really comes down to individuals. For some people, university is absolutely the right thing. For other people, it is going to be bollocks for you and no good at all, and only you can really make that call. Now, next week, I have got Sally LePage, who is a YouTube superstar for science communications, and she does lots of nature and science YouTube stuff. And we're going to be talking about how you can create your brand on YouTube, how you can make fantastic videos and really grow it all on there. We're also going to talk a little bit about diversity in television, in particular the recent series of Winter Watch, as Sally did a little survey on that and found that there was not a great deal of diversity. So we're going to have a little waffle about that as well. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's podcast. This has been the Bearded Tits Podcast. I've been your host, Jack Perks, and I will see you next week. Cheers.